Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our November edition of Real Estate Today webinar. We're so sorry starting behind schedule, but thank God that we are here now. So we want to say a warm welcome to all of you from the management and the entire team of Ubosele. And in case you are joining us for the very first time, we want to say a big and a special welcome to you. And to also tell you that we are Ubosele and Co, a firm of estate surveyor and valuers. We've been around in the markets of Nigeria, the Nigerian market, and even beyond, over 30 years doing real estate, working real estate and talking real estate, just like we're going to be talking real estate this afternoon. And some of our services are estate agency, property management, asset valuation and advisory, and we also do financial and asset audit. So my name is Mojisola Ogunkoya, and I'm your host for this webinar. Just a bit of housekeeping before we continue. Please, if you're on this call right now, kindly tell someone to tell another person that Real Estate Today webinar is live so that we can have a robust interaction and, and more interactive session. And so today, in our last session, we talked about, another information I want to give out is that you will have opportunity to ask questions. So if you have questions while the talk is going on, kindly use the chat room or use the Q&A session. And if you want to talk to us, if you have a question or some contribution and you would like to talk, you will be given that opportunity. Just make use of the raise of hand button, and at the appropriate time, you will be allowed to talk. And so today, in our last edition, we talked about real estate in inflationary economy. And it was an amazing session. And our speaker told us that investment in real estate or in property is actually a catalyst for an inflationary economy. And there will always be people demanding for house. So investing in property actually is something that is very, very key. And so in this edition today, we have another amazing topic talking about the high cost of building materials and its impact in real estate development. High cost of building materials and its impact on real estate investment. And to take us through this experience today is none other person than Mr. Adesina Adeleke. So I would like to read a brief profile of Mr. Adesina Adeleke. Mr. Adesina Adeleke is a graduate of estate management from Abia State University, and he joined the services of Ubosele and Co. in 2003 as a graduate surveyor. After years of diligence and good ethical practice, he rose to the position of associate partner of the firm, a position he currently holds. He has undergone several trainings that have sharpened his professionalism in the industry, and he has also facilitated in training dozens of other estate surveyors who are upholding the ethics of the practice. In addition to his position as an associate partner of the firm, he heads the Ikeja office of the firm, and he ensures seamless and smooth running of the office in both practice and process. So with a virtual clap, let's make welcome our speaker for today, Mr. Adesina Adeleke.
Yeah, thank you very much, Oji, for the brief introduction. I'm most happy to be here to be the one to deliver this topic, which I know is a very interesting topic that concerns everybody. Because I know once you talk about housing, housing is one thing that everybody just needs in one form or the other. Housing provision in itself is something that concerns everybody, just like I said. So we shall be taking a look into the high cost of building materials, how it relates to the provision of housing, and how it has probably mitigated against the production, the supply of housing. Housing provision is actually a very interesting topic as it concerns everyone. And Nigeria itself as a country, is a country with rapidly growing population and urbanization. Whilst population itself is an advantage, if not managed properly, population itself can actually be a recipe for poverty, inequality, and so many other vices. High cost of building materials also, as it affects the building itself, housing provision, if not managed properly, with an increasing population, can also be a disadvantage to any country. So the escalating cost of building materials is not only impacting the affordability of housing, but also posing obstacles to the timely completion of projects. Now, we've seen cases where, for instance, all over Lagos and environs where particular projects were supposed to have been completed. And because of the high cost of building, some of these projects sometimes delay. And like I traced earlier about the issue of population that it affects housing provision, the influx of people from the rural settlers of rural areas to the urban areas have caused huge impacts, negative impacts, because of the problem cost. What we see is a situation where people leave the rural areas and migrate to the urban areas. And then we have a problem where demand most times outweighs supply. And simple economics, when demand outweighs supplies, what you have is that there's scarcity, and then the high cost of building materials and housing provision begins to grow up. So the phenomenon is not only impacting the affordability of housing, but also posing obstacles to the timely completion of the project. Now, there's this debate on what is the actual figure that is actually, what's the gap that needs to be closed in the housing industry. I know it's a question that has been debated over the months or years by so many people from the part of the government and also from the part of professionals too. The International Human Rights Commission, for instance, says that about 28 million housing units is needed to lack access to decent and affordable housing. This is also in tandem with the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, who also projects that at least about 28 million housing units is needed to close the housing gap. Now, those figures are huge. The federal government, the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria also estimates about 21 trillion naira needed in order to close this gap. Now, with the ever-increasing population of Nigeria and influx from the rural areas to the urban centers, this gap begins to widen over time. So, well, for this purpose, at least, we're going to delve into the root causes of the high cost of building materials in Nigeria, and also explore the profound implications it has on real estate development. Current cost of building materials in Nigeria. Over the past decade, the cost of building materials in Nigeria has witnessed unprecedented surge. Now, materials such as wood, steel, timber, iron rod, cement have experienced price hike that are affecting construction projects nationwide. Now, a test case, which I think I took upon myself to do, was to examine the cost of some building materials in the country over the past few years. And one of the things I observed now, for instance, I took a look into the COVID era, that's starting from maybe 2019, where a bag of cement, for instance, was going for about 2,500 naira to 2,850 naira as at then. Then the following year, post-COVID 2020, a bag of cement rose to around 3,500 naira, an average price at its peak. And 2021 again rose to about 3,800 naira. And as at today, the price is actually fluctuating sometime between 4,900 and 5,400 naira. Now, if we look at that gap between 2019 and 2023, we have a huge, gap of about 2,500 naira to 2,900 naira. So, according to industry reports, inflation in building materials costs have even outpaced the general inflation rate. So, going back to what has been happening in the country, we witnessed Nigeria itself have been experiencing what I would describe as maybe galloping inflation ever since maybe the last couple of months, about 6-7 months ago, after the fuel pump price change. Nigeria's inflation jumped to about 25.80. That's at August 2023, according to Consumer Price Index by the National Bureau of Statistics. Now, just some few months after that, I think by October 2023, the inflation figure rose to around 27.33. That's almost 28%. Those figures are huge. The Bureau of Statistics, however, gave indices for that. They said key sectors that drove up the economy, that drove up inflation, were, amongst other things, apart from housing, were food, alcoholic beverages, electricity, fuel, gas, amongst other things. But housing itself and building materials costs alone was over 30%, according to the statistics that were arrived at. So the industry reports that the inflation in building materials costs have outpaced the general inflation, making it a critical concern for developers, investors, and potential homeowners alike. This is bearing in mind that building materials accounts for about 30 to 50% of project costs and controls about 80% of the schedule. Of course, we know that building materials are not the only material needed in housing provision. There are so many other things that come into play each time we talk about housing or building, a cost of building, some of which, of course, are labor, land, some of which are land, labor, machinery, transportation costs, professional fees, the cost of finance, and so many, just to mention a few. So all these contribute to the final cost, the increase in, the increase in the cost of building. Now, factors that contribute to high building materials costs. One of the things I think I've noted here, first of all, is the foreign exchange rates. Many building materials in Nigeria are imported. Nigeria is a country, some people describe it as a dollarized economy, that we solely most times rely on importation of our goods and services that we are mainly used within the country. This has no doubt affected us because whenever there is an increase in the dollar rates, definitely there is an immediate increase in the prices of these materials. Most of these materials are imported, whether you're talking about or finishes, the doors, tiles, and so many other materials. It's actually on the increase. Now, a dollar price as at 2023 actually was fluctuating, and at some point it rose to about 1,200 naira to a dollar and over. But averagely now, I think it's around 530 naira to a dollar. But compare this with what happened, let's say, in year 2019, the COVID era, when the naira dollar price was around 359 naira to a dollar. And by 2020, it rose to around 470 naira to a dollar. 2021 also, we have about 560 naira to a dollar, and now it's in the neighborhood of, I think, 830 to 850 naira to a dollar. Now, anytime, whenever there is exchange rate fluctuations, it can have a substantial impact on the cost of building and, of course, building supplies. This actually causes prices to rise or at times decrease. But in the case of Nigeria, I think most times it increases. Now, supply chain disruption. One of the primary causes, the primary contribution to the high cost of building materials in Nigeria is the frequent disruption in the supply chain. Global events such as the Russian war or the COVID-19 have negative effects, as most of the goods and services that are supplied from those regions, once the supply chain is disrupted, it becomes impossible for those goods and services to be delivered to their point of destination. This leads to a shortage in supply, thereby causing inflation. And also, of course, when that happens, there is also the problem of increased transportation. The reliance on imported material also exacerbates the impact of this disruption, creating a ripple effect across the entire construction industry. Increased demand for housing. Nigeria's rapid growth, population growth, and urbanization has led to unprecedented demand for housing and infrastructure projects. The surge in demand for construction materials have resulted in higher prices as suppliers struggle to keep pace. Now, like I said earlier, when there is increase in demand against supply, definitely the prices begin to go up. As population growth begins to expand, definitely then we have a case where people begin to compete for the little things, the little provision that is available. 2019 survey puts Nigeria at about, let me mention, for 2016 survey put Nigeria at about 185 million population. And by year 2023, their population has already risen to 223 million. Now, when those population increases, what you have is that more of those people, the influx of people from rural settlers to the urban areas begin to increase also. So you now have more demand that is being created in the urban areas. By 2050, it is projected that Nigeria's population is going to rise to about 337 million people. That will make Nigeria about the third largest population, maybe after China and India. Now, when you have a population that, within the space of less than 20 or about 25 years, it's almost doubling its inflation, then if the provision of housing doesn't meet up at that pace, definitely there's going to be a problem, which is part of what we are experiencing now at 223 million population, as we rank number 6 in the world. So the surge in demand for construction materials has beyond the reach of the average investor. Government's efforts also to bridge the housing deficit have further intensified the strain on the supply chain, leading to increased cost for developers. Now, tariffs and trade policies. Trade policies and tariffs also play a significant role in escalating costs of building materials. Now, when government directs its policies towards policies that are not so favorable to building materials that are being imported, since we rely more on importation as a nation, it causes a strain in the provision of those goods and services that are coming in. The high cost of building materials are being affected. Changes in international trade dynamics and geopolitical tension can also result in increased import tariffs, directly affecting the cost of construction. Developers find themselves grappling with higher expenses, making it challenging to maintain projects, budgets, and deliver affordable housing solutions. Inflation. Inflation is one another factor that also affects or that's negatively to the high cost of building materials in the country. Inflation in Nigeria is currently very high. And just like I said earlier, as at October 2023, inflation rose to almost 28%. As the general price of goods and services increase, so will the cost of building materials increase, resulting into greater construction costs. Transport costs. After the change in pump price announcement in May, pump price rose from, I think, about 165 to between 165 and 185 naira per liter to over 500 naira per liter. And currently, it is close to about 600 naira per liter, and in some places, it's probably even above that. Now, once the pump price is increased, the general transportation costs increase. Now, whether it's locally transportation of goods and services or imported goods that are coming into the country, either being shipped into the country one way or the other. Materials for building must be delivered from one point of manufacture or importation to the construction site. Transportation costs, such as fuel prices, transportation infrastructure, and security, can have a substantial impact on the cost of building supplies. Availability on demand. The availability and demand for building materials can have an impact on their cost. If a material is in high demand and its supply is restricted, the prices of these materials may increase. This is a common experience that we have in Nigeria when we hear that certain building materials are cheaper, for instance, in neighborhood African countries, and those materials cannot find their way into the country. Now, what happens is that the local supply that we have, once the demand outweighs the supplies, the price keeps going up. And except maybe there is a competitive supply of those production of goods and those services, then the cost, those costs begins to increase without any control. Government policies, again, also such as taxes, tariffs, and restrictions can have substantial impact on the cost of building materials. High taxes and tariffs on imported building materials, for example, can raise the cost of construction, whereas policies that encourage local production or reduce taxes can lower prices. Now we're going to look at the impacts on real estate development, how the high costs of building materials impacts on real estate development in Nigeria. Now, one of the first thing I have here is project delays. Once the cost of building materials goes up, it is being translated into widespread project delays. It's a common knowledge that when projects are delayed, definitely the cost of those projects also increases. So construction projects ranging from residential development to large-scale infrastructural initiatives are being hampered by the unavailability and high cost of essential materials. Delays not only inflates the cost, but also creates a backlog of incomplete projects, hindering the overall growth of the real estate sector. Projects delay will definitely result into increased project costs. So the faster a project is to be completed, the lesser the amount that is expended on that project. Escalation in construction costs. Developers are faced with a daunting task of managing the escalating construction costs, impacting the financial feasibility of projects. Once the cost of construction begins to rise, it has a direct impact on construction costs because, again, it's wanting to give a cost estimate, and by the time the project is getting close to completion, or midway down the project. Some factors, a lot of factors that I think we've identified earlier, affects the overall cost of those projects. The rise in material costs directly translates to higher construction costs, often leading to budget overrun. This, in turn, affects the profitability of projects and poses challenges for developers in attracting investment for future ventures. Affordability challenge. Now, when the cost of building increases, definitely by the time those projects are completed, there's a problem of affordability. Most times, they are usually beyond the reach of the average persons who have a set budget, maybe usually at the beginning of the project. And by the time the developer is completing the project, they have a totally different figure from what they had planned. Perhaps the most pressing concern stemming from the high cost of building materials is the impact on housing affordability. The dream of home ownership becomes increasingly elusive for many Nigerians as property prices soar. Renters also feel the pinch as landlords grappling with higher construction costs pass the burden to tenants in form of increased rent. Now, we also have the problem of increased rental prices. One, the construction costs are high. Developers themselves need to recoup their project expenses, and in such a way, as a result of this, the burden is being passed on to the lessee, who's the person who's going to take lease of the property. High construction costs will definitely result to an increase in rental prices, and developers might have a challenge to recoup their project expenses. This again may not make those projects, may not make it a very interesting experience, because you have to start battling with how much do we now put the property in the market with. Increased prices will also mean making it difficult for the developers or the investors to also get prospective buyers or lessees. So thereby the return on investment is affected. Now, reduced housing supply. Higher building costs will lead to a reduction in housing supply and can make it less attractive investment for developers. This can lead to a decrease in housing supply, particularly in regions where affordability is already a concern. Reduced supply can further drive up property prices, making it even more challenging for individuals and businesses to afford real estate. Now we're going to be looking at the economic impacts. The performance of real estate can serve as a leading indicator of economic strength, while economic conditions shape the demand and supply dynamics of property sector. When the cost of building materials increases, it can adversely affect or impact construction activities and hinder economic growth. This can result in reduced job opportunities in the construction industry and slow down in related industries, affecting the overall economy. Strategies for mitigating costs. Well, one of the strategies for mitigating costs is diversification of suppliers. When there is too much reliance on a particular supplier, it definitely has a negative impact on the supply of building materials. So it's diversification of suppliers that to navigate the challenges posed by the high cost of building materials. Developers themselves in Nigeria are exploring strategies such as diversifying their suppliers. Relying on a single source of materials increases vulnerability to supply chain disruption. By engaging multiple suppliers, developers can mitigate risk and negotiate better terms, fostering a more resilient approach to procurement. Technology integration. The integration of technology in construction practices is gaining traction as a means of mitigating costs. Advanced project management tools such as building information modeling and automation are being employed to optimize construction processes, reduce labor costs, and also enhance overall efficiency. These technological shifts not only decreases cost concerns, but also positions the industry for sustainable growth. Now, sustainable practice. Embracing sustainable building practices is emerging as a viable strategy for managing building materials costs. Developers are exploring eco-friendly materials and construction methods that not only contribute to environmental conservation, but also offer long-term cost savings. Sustainable practices align with global trends and can enhance the marketability of real estate projects. Now, further recommendations. The following recommendations can also be considered to address the high costs of building materials, building materials and impacts on real estate development. Then there is need to encourage local production of building materials in the country. Now, the reliance on importation and imported goods have a huge and negative impact on Nigeria. First of all, we have inflation that we're supposed to grapple with. And by the time we are busy struggling with exchange rate, the Naira-dollar exchange rate, which has been on the increase. We've never had a very steady Naira-dollar exchange rate. So it actually discourages a reduction in the price of building materials. So government can provide incentives for local production of building materials. This will help to reduce the reliance on imported materials and make those materials affordable. Now, supports research and development. Government and the private sector can support research and development into new and innovative building materials. This could lead to the development of more affordable and sustainable building materials. Of recent, I think that's been in the news now of how bamboo reinforced concrete has been the new trend, and it has been explored. It has been currently explored and experimented in certain parts of Nigeria to see if that might be a possible alternative or replacement for steel. Steel itself has some disadvantages, which and those disadvantages can be taken care of by the provision of the bamboo concrete. But a lot of research needs to be put into it to further develop it so that to see if that's a possible alternative for people to look into. Now, promote alternative building technologies. The government can also promote the use of alternative building technologies such as prefabricated construction. This could help to reduce the cost and time of construction projects. This is being explored currently in so many parts of the world where they already have prefabricated building construction materials from walls to so many other building parts that have been prefabricated. Government can also provide subsidies for low-income housing developers. The government can provide for low-income housing developers to help offset the high cost of building materials. This will make it possible for developers to build more affordable housing. Successful cost management. Prudent real estate developers who have successfully managed building materials costs have done so through strategic planning and implementing innovative approaches. Such projects usually highlight the importance of proactive risk management, diversified procurement strategies, and adoption of technology in achieving cost efficiency. Now, what does the future look like? looking ahead, the future of real estate development in Nigeria will be shaped by how the industry adapts to the evolving landscape of building materials cost. Predictions indicate that a comprehensive approach that combines sustainable practices, technology integration, and strategic supply chain management will be crucial for the sustained growth of the sector. In conclusion, the high cost of building materials in Nigeria poses a multifaceted challenge to the real estate development in Nigeria. While the current scenario presents obstacles, it also opens avenues for innovation and strategic planning by addressing the root causes, adopting forward-thinking strategies, revitalizing our industry base, and learning from both successes and failures. The Nigerian real estate sector can overcome the challenges posed by the high cost of building materials, ensuring sustainability and affordable housing solution for its ever-growing population. Well, at this point, I want to say a big thank you to everybody that has listened, and I'll be glad to take questions from our listeners. I believe that there'll be one or two people who may want to also contribute to this great topic of the high cost of building materials and its impact on real estate development in Nigeria. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Mr. Adesina Adeleke, for that amazing session. And I believe that I have learned a lot of other people on this call have learned so much. So please, let's keep the question coming in. And if you want to speak to us, kindly use the raise up hand button and we'll allow you to talk. And like you have said, looking at the high cost of building materials and how it has affected so many things, inflation, actually, the high cost is affecting everything. Even when you want to buy just banana, the banana woman will be telling you that, exchange rate and exchange rate and exchange rate. So not talk more of when you are building, you are doing an investment in property or you are trying to build a house. So the actual cost of everything has risen. And he has also told us about how delay when you start to build a particular property and you don't have funds to finish on time, the rate keeps increasing. And so the cost of building the property keeps going on. But the good thing, like we had in our last session, saying that there's always demand. There is always demand because people will not live under the street or under the bridge. They'll be looking for a space to go. So investment in property is still something that is important and a catalyst, even despite the increase. So let's see, we have a question already. Please, if you have questions, please kindly let them come in. And if you want to talk, kindly use the raise of hand button and we'll allow you to talk. So, sir, we have a question here. Let's start with this. Someone said that, because it's anonymous, someone said that with the new development of the concrete road project going on within the country, what is the impact of this on the housing development, considering the demand and supply against cost? Where government itself is already demanding cement to do this. So what impact will it have on the economy? Do you get the question?
Okay. Let me take that. Okay. What this will just translate to immediately is that there will be so much demand for cement, and once there's demand in just that one particular area, definitely just the normal law of demand and supply. Once demand increases above supply, prices will definitely increase. Nigeria have been battling with current prices, not only cement, also we have steel that have been rising, continuously rising in the country. 1 minute. The cost of steel now, for instance, rose from 2019, was around 215,000 naira, And by 2023, we can have a cost of, that's a ton of steel, rose to around 510,000 naira. Definitely when you have the major components of the building materials that are being used by one sector of the economy, like for instance, like you mentioned, the road project, definitely as demand in those areas begins to rise, definitely the cost of cement definitely is going to go up, and the cost of those concretes. An immediate thing to do is for government to either allow more people to come into the production of cement, or also to probably maybe look into the option of allowing more importation of those building materials, the concrete, the steel that are needed in the production of those concretes to come into the country. So that's what I feel the solution is.
Okay, thank you so very much. So let's go to another question. I have another question saying, with the current fluctuation rate of building materials in Nigeria, is there still any hope for the common man in terms of cheap and affordable housing?
Okay, yes, I would say there is hope for the common man, in as much as the government is willing to invest into research. Just like I mentioned earlier, there is the bamboo craze that is currently going on, and test cases are all over the country, where these things are being put into it's there on the internet. People who are interested can also have a look into it. It's bamboo is believed to have, according to researchers, they say bamboo has a more tensile strength than steel. So it can withstand some amount of load, even higher than steel. In some areas that are prone to earthquakes all over the world, bamboo technology is also being used. So if government can invest more into this area, bamboo, for instance, is also considered to be fire resistant. And the capacity of bamboo, for instance, to resist fire can be very high, higher than that of, because it's said to contain high value silicate acid and water. Then bamboo also has elasticity, like I said, in areas that are prone to earthquakes, is being used. Then the weight of bamboo, again, it's something that is beneficial, is of advantage to the building industry. Bamboo has low weight and are easily displayed or installed, making it easier for transportation and construction. Maybe unlike other building materials, such as maybe cement, bamboo usually poses no danger to health. The production of steel, for instance, is ones that emit so much carbon. A lot of carbon waste is being produced in the course of producing steel. So, but for bamboo is actually organic, and it's a natural material, the material from nature. So the benefits are there, and currently it's believed that the benefit might even outweigh that of steel. So a lot of research, as long as government is beginning to, it's ready to throw more funds into research, for the building materials, definitely there is hope that one day that housing can be cheap and affordable to the common man.
Well, thank you so very much, sir. I love the fact that you try to explain the bamboo tree. Like we normally say that options are always available. So the inflationary rate is actually creating more innovative and looking at the economy, we are trying to see other things, other options, just like what you have mentioned. So thank you so very much for that answer. So I'd like to go to another question. ESV Moses Alabi said, how do industry of building material and their potential impact on real estate development? So he actually asked the two questions. Maybe I should just take the second one. Have there been changes in the type of material developers are choosing to use due to cost consideration, and how does the impact overall? How does the impact the project quality? I believe that you have talked on this second one, but you can still give us more info concerning it. Did you get the question, sir, or do I go
Yes, I
the
do.
question
I
again?
do. I think industry experts, developers, and property developers are currently looking for ways to bring down costs. And in fact, it's a continuous thing that every investor wants to do, every property developer wants to do. The first thing that's coming to your mind is, how do we reduce the cost of building materials? Future trends regarding building materials and their potential impacts. Now, in as much as we begin to look at how to, there are so many alternatives that are open, which again are probably because of the options that we have or reliance on, like I said, most times we rely on imported materials. In as much as we don't look inwards and we don't look into our local production, definitely we might still continue the same problem. But as much as we can look inwards and then look into how much of these things we can produce locally, sometimes the finished materials, for instance, the doors, windows, aluminiums that are being produced, that are being shipped directly into the country, why not we begin to produce them here? If we produce them here, there are so many things. You are going to create employment. You are going to reduce the cost of transportation. Transportation may not be there. And definitely the cost definitely is going to reduce. Government also can also encourage people who also go into these areas by reducing tariffs and taxes upon some of these people or industries who wish to explore those routes. So in as much as we begin to look inwards as developers or as people who are interested into going into the building industry, definitely there's going to be the drastic drop in the cost of building materials. Then the second one says, have there been changes in the types of building material developers are choosing to use due to cost consideration? Definitely, there have been changes to the types of building materials. Again, another dangerous thing to do is also to begin to cut costs at the expense of a development that is actually sustainable. When you begin to cut costs and begin to use inferior materials in the cost of construction, it impacts negatively. We've heard cases of so many structures that have gone down, and it's usually not a very interesting story when we hear these kind of things. They are not stories that are good for the public. So, yeah, we can think of how to reduce costs, but then also we should be careful how we do it, as such that we don't also end up on the negative end. Developers, like I said, can look inwards and they begin to look at alternative building materials, which of course they've been doing. Now there's this what they call sawdust concrete too, that is also being experimented all over. In fact, it is being used currently in so many parts of the world. And there are some certain types of development there are certain types of development they also use it for. So these are areas where I think we can also use consider. Then there's also the issue of the greenhouse or greenhousing. There are so many things that can be done in housing provision in a way to reduce costs. One of them is also greenhousing, which makes use of natural advantage, or which nature, the advantage of nature in construction industry, whereby also reducing the overall cost of the project.
Thank you so very much. One key thing that you mentioned there is for us to look inward. So as people, we must learn to appreciate what we produce locally so that the cost can come down. And so we have another question here. Very interesting. What is the impact of the current demolition in Lekki area by the Lagos state government on real estate and real estate projects and prices?
Well, the demolition in Lagos, of course, I know it's a very controversial topic. It's all over the news. But the critical thing, let me just go to how it affects housing supply. Definitely when you have more buildings going down, and we are talking of housing supply that is quite very low. I mean, when you begin to also demolish houses, the number of houses provided are also, that is already in short supply, is also getting worsened, you know. So what we actually need is an increase in the provision. But then again, people need to also comply with government regulations, the laws, existing laws of the land, and the like. I mean, that's what I think people need to do. You need to build in accordance with the law and the provisions of the law, so that, for instance, there are people who have been reported that they build along the canals. Those are dangerous, areas to actually put where human beings are going to stay. And it's not really an interesting thing. It's not an interesting news when we hear that properties are being demolished. But then also we have to also think about the negative impacts some of these developments will have on human lives. So definitely we want more buildings, and more buildings need to be put into place. But then again, like, human lives need to be considered, I mean, in doing those things too.
Thank you very much. So I like the fact that you said that we must learn to comply with government regulations so that we can militate against this demolition. But as a real estate professional, how do we create this awareness for people to, the compliance? How do we create this awareness so that, do you understand my question, sir?
Yeah, I get you. I think one of the very first steps to take is always to consult professionals. Anytime you are going into building construction and projects of the likes, there's no way you do those things, I mean, with an expert, and then you arrive at an error. And that's where also we also can also come in to also give advices from also our past experience, and also tell you how to go about it. Then again, another problem is that when people begin to look for how to cut corners and don't also want to abide by the regulations, government regulations, the building standards and building regulations, definitely there might be problems along the line. So, but the first step, I think my major advice is that, look, you need to consult experts in those areas. There are people in the design and build industries. For instance, the estate surveyor, whom before you can even probably buy your land, can also tell you advice on so many things: location, where to buy, what type of property are you developing. There are so many questions which an estate surveyor will put to you and ask. Then he'll probably be able to guide you aright and give you necessary information on what to do. Also, maybe also to the type of development that you should go through. There are other people also involved in the building industry. For instance, when you talk about the cost of construction, there's no way you are going to rule out the QS, for instance. You need a QS who is also going to give you the cost estimate, so that when you also start the build project, you don't end up halfway and then realize that you cannot complete the project. But I think the first step is even to consult an expert, to consult an estate surveyor and valuer, which of course we're in the position to also give you those advices, and they'll be able to guide you right, also tell you which professionals to meet part-time, construct, and give necessary advices when needed.
Thank you so very much. I think we are gradually coming to the end because we have one more question to go. Talking about transportation of building materials and manpower involved in building, why do places like Lagos, Abuja still have high costs in building projects and rent than other states who will incur more costs in transportation costs and manpower?
Well, the transportation itself affects not only the building industry, it affects everything. Like I said earlier, the moment the announcement was made for the fuel pump price increase, the price of everything in the market just escalated. Now, the reason is simple: because you still definitely need to transport. Those building materials are actually heavy-duty materials most times, and you would definitely need to commute them from one region to another. Whether it's Lagos, the ones coming into Lagos, for instance, on the practical level, is probably being shipped into Nigeria, maybe through the ports. So definitely, since it is not, again, locally produced, Now you have to factor in so many things, the Naira dollar exchange rate, which, for instance, maybe at the cost of your project, maybe the value of the Naira to the dollar, let's say, for instance, as at maybe 2022 was probably around 450. Sorry, was a little bit lesser, was around 722, 2022 was around 736 Naira to a dollar. And by 2023, currently now it's in the neighborhood of 850 Naira to a dollar. Definitely by the time you factor those things, I mean, the cost of those building materials is already on the increase. There are so many other things, inflation also, aside transportation, there's the general inflation that is going on. So definitely anything that affects the cost of pump price will definitely have a rippling effect on every other material and every other goods and services that are being produced in the country, that are being used in the country. So it's not only real estate, and definitely it's going to also affect every other, whether it's in Lagos, Abuja, everywhere. So far as we don't, in as much as we don't look inwards, if we have local production, it is easier for us to determine the price, to look at what exactly do we have as advantages. There are so many countries in the world where, for instance, they rely so much on wood, on timber, to develop their real estate. Nigeria has not looked so much on how we can probably make use of wood to also complement or use in our building projects. Many great developments all over the world, timber is being considered most times to actually replace most of what we use concrete or cement for. So, like I said again, I reiterate it once more, we need to look inwards if actually we want those prices to come down and encourage local production. I think that's the way to go.
Thank you so much. We need to look inward. And also, you know, when we look at rents in Lagos and Abuja, comparing it to other states, we also need to also look at demand, the demand for them. And so, like he has said in his, our speaker has said in his presentation that, you know, demand to also influence the prices. So more people in Lagos, we have more people in Lagos and in Abuja that compared to maybe somewhere in my village or somewhere in my state. So that's what can also contribute to that, the high cost of rent. So at this junction, we want to say thank you so much to our speaker, Mr. Adesina Adeleke. Thank you for this amazing session with you. We also want to thank our participants. Thank you for sticking to us to the end. And especially, we want to thank you because right from April 2023, you've been doing this webinar every month and you've been coming, you've been joining. So we really appreciate your attendance. And we also want to say that we have come to the end, not to the end of the webinar, but to the end of the webinar for 2023. And so in December, we'll not be having any edition because we want you to have good time to enjoy yourself. But by January, by the grace of God, come 2024, we'll be calling on you again to join us. We want to appreciate your attendance, your contribution throughout the year. And we pray that even as you go through the season, that God's blessing be upon you, your family, and your business. So from every one of us, from our management to every of our staff, our team members, we want to say thank you. I want to say enjoy the rest of your day. God bless you.